The roar hits you first, then the smell of blood and sweat, mixed with the stench of 50,000 unwashed bodies, packed into stone seats under the Mediterranean sun. You're standing in the Colosseum, and the sand beneath your feet is stained dark from yesterday's executions. Today, something different is about to happen. The gates grind open, and a man walks out alone. No ceremony, no introduction. He's built like he was carved from granite, every muscle honed by years of surviving what no one else could. The crowd knows his name before the announcer can speak it. They've been waiting for this. His name is Flamma, and he's about to do something that will confuse historians. For 2,000 years, most gladiators fought because they had no choice. Prisoners of war, slaves, condemned criminals, all thrown into an arena where the average life expectancy was measured in fights, not years. 3 to 5 bouts if you were lucky, 10 if you were exceptional. Flamma fought 34 times and won. But here's what makes absolutely no sense. 4 times, he was offered the rudis, a wooden sword symbolizing freedom. 4 times, he could have walked away from the blood and the screaming crowds and the very real possibility of dying for entertainment. Most gladiators would kill for one chance at freedom. Flamma turned it down every single time and walked back into the arena. The Samnite's path. Let's rewind to how someone becomes this kind of warrior. Flamma starts as a Syrian, probably captured during one of Rome's endless military campaigns in the East. The Roman Empire in the 2nd century is a machine that devours people and spits out entertainment. He gets sold to a ludus, a gladiator school that's part prison, part military academy, part slaughterhouse. The conditions are exactly what you'd expect from a place designed to produce human weapons. Tiny cells, brutal training, and food calculated to build muscle while keeping you compliant. But Flamma shows something different from day one. While other recruits are still figuring out which end of the sword to hold, he's studying angles, timing, the way weight shifts before a strike. The lanista, the gladiator trainer, recognizes it immediately. This one might actually survive. They train him as a Samnite, later called a Secutor, one of the heaviest gladiator classes. He carries a large rectangular shield, wears a visored helmet that turns his head into a smooth egg shape, and fights with a gladius, the short Roman sword designed for stabbing, not slashing. The armor weighs around 15 kilograms. Try running in that while someone's trying to kill you. His opponent is usually a Retiarius, a gladiator armed with a net and trident, wearing almost no armor. It's intentionally mismatched, like watching a tank fight a dancer. The Retiarius relies on speed and distance, trying to tangle the Secutor in the net and then stab him with the trident before he can close the gap. Flamma learns to cut through this strategy like it's made of paper. The mathematics of survival. Here's what nobody tells you about gladiatorial combat. It's not really about killing. Rome spent serious money training these fighters. Killing them quickly is bad economics. The goal is spectacle, blood, drama. A good fight might last 15 to 20 minutes of actual combat, though it probably felt like hours to the men involved. Death rates were somewhere around 10 to 20% per fight, which sounds almost reasonable until you realize that's per fight. Stack those odds across multiple bouts, and the survival curve drops off a cliff. Flamma beat those odds 34 times. To put that in perspective, imagine flipping a coin and needing heads to survive. Getting heads 34 times in a row would have odds of roughly 1 in 17 billion. Even with better than coin flip chances, the compounding probability of surviving that many fights is astronomical. So what made him different? Skill is the obvious answer, but skill alone doesn't explain turning down freedom 4 times. You don't reject freedom because you're good at fighting. You reject it because something else is happening, something that goes beyond simple survival instinct. The first time they offered him the rudis, Flamma was already a veteran of multiple victories. The crowd loved him. His owner probably wasn't thrilled about losing a profitable asset, but these were the rules. Win enough, show enough courage, and Rome rewarded you with freedom. He looked at that wooden sword, the symbol every gladiator dreamed of, and said no. Then he turned around and walked back to the ludus to prepare for the next fight. What drives someone to make that choice? The answer is waiting in the arena, written in blood and sand, and the psychology of a man who found something most people spend their entire lives searching for. The answer starts with understanding what the arena actually was beneath the blood and spectacle. Modern people imagine gladiators as slaves forced to fight, but the reality was more complicated. Yes, most started as slaves or prisoners, but inside the ludus, a strange kind of meritocracy emerged. Win fights and you gained status, better food, private cells, even sexual access. The ludus became its own society with its own hierarchy, and at the top sat fighters like Flamma. Outside those walls, Roman society was rigid. Your birth determined everything. A slave could never become a citizen through normal means. A poor freeman would stay poor. Social mobility was essentially frozen. But inside the arena, none of that mattered. A slave could humiliate a nobleman's favorite fighter. A prisoner could become more famous than senators. The sand was the only true meritocracy in Rome, where your value was measured purely by what you could do, not who your father was. For someone like Flamma, this might have been intoxicating. Consider what freedom actually meant for a gladiator in the 1st century. You're freed with no money, no property, no family connections. The brand on your skin marks you as former arena trash. Respectable Romans won't associate with you. You can't hold office. You can't testify in court. You're technically free, but functionally worthless. Meanwhile, back in the ludus, you're fed, housed, and treated for injuries. Win fights, and you're celebrated, wealthy, desired. Lose, and you might die, but at least you die as someone who mattered. Flamma had found something rare, a place where he was undeniably valuable. The second time they offered him the rudis, he was already wealthy by gladiator standards. His winnings had piled up. He could have bought a small farm, lived quietly. Instead, he chose the violence he understood over the uncertainty waiting outside. This reveals something uncomfortable about human nature. We like to think everyone wants freedom above all else, but what people really want is purpose, status, the feeling that they matter. Sometimes the cage provides that better than the world outside ever could. The arena economy. Let's talk about what Flamma's fights actually looked like economically. A major gladiatorial game could cost the sponsor anywhere from several thousand to millions of sesterces, depending on scale. The games weren't just entertainment. They were political advertisements. Sponsors bought popularity through blood. Voters remembered who gave them the best show. This created a strange dynamic. Gladiators were simultaneously the lowest and highest value people in Rome. Low because they were mostly slaves and criminals. High because a starfighter could make or break a politician's career. Flamma became a star. His name alone could draw crowds. Promoters paid premium rates to have him fight. His owner was making a fortune. But more importantly, Flamma himself was accumulating real wealth through prizes and private gifts from admirers. Roman sources mention gladiators receiving gold crowns, silver dishes, sometimes bags of gold coins from impressed spectators. Flamma fought 34 times. Even conservative estimates put his accumulated wealth in the hundreds of thousands of sesterces. He was rich, he was famous, he was 21 victories into immortality, and he still said no to freedom. The third refusal came after what witnesses described as his most spectacular victory. Details are scarce, but the fight apparently involved a near-death moment where Flamma reversed a seemingly hopeless situation. The crowd went absolutely insane. The emperor himself, according to one account, stood and applauded. They offered him the rudis again. He refused again. By now, this was becoming a legend in itself. Romans loved this story because it confused them. Their entire society was built on the assumption that freedom was the highest good, the thing every slave desperately wanted. Here was a man proving them wrong, and they didn't know what to make of it. Some called him mad. Others saw something almost philosophical in his choice, a rejection of the shallow freedom Rome offered in favor of the deeper purpose he'd found in combat. The truth was probably simpler and more human. Flamma had become excellent at one thing. That one thing gave him wealth, status, and meaning. Everything else was uncertainty and irrelevance. So he kept fighting. The fourth refusal came near the end. By then, Flamma was aging by gladiator standards. The winds were harder. His body carried the accumulated damage of dozens of fights. Smart money said his luck was running out. They offered him the rudis one final time, practically begging him to retire with honor while he still could. He looked at that wooden sword, symbol of freedom, ticket to a normal life. Then he walked back into the ludus to prepare for fight number 34. Understanding why requires looking at what happened next, at the final mathematics of a life measured in victories, and at the strange kind of immortality Flamma was actually chasing. The final count, fight number 34, ended differently. The sources don't give us much detail about how Flamma died. No dramatic final stand, no heroic last words recorded for posterity. Just the simple fact that he entered the arena one more time and didn't walk out. He was 30 years old. His tomb, discovered centuries later, contains the full accounting. 34 fights, 21 victories, 9 draws, 4 defeats that he survived. Then the final fight, marked simply with the notation that ends every gladiator's record, perished. The tomb was expensive, elaborately decorated, paid for either by his owner or by admirers. It lists his name, his record, and one other detail that matters. It notes the 4 times he was offered the rudis. 4 times he refused freedom. Even in death, that refusal was considered his defining characteristic. Here's what makes the math interesting. The average gladiator fought 3 times per year. Flamma's 34 fights across roughly 12 years tracks almost perfectly. He wasn't avoiding combat. He was in the arena constantly, taking every fight offered. Most gladiators who survived to earn freedom did so by fighting conservatively, taking fewer risks, drawing when they could. Flamma did the opposite. He accumulated 9 draws, yes, but 21 kills. He fought to win decisively every single time. This suggests something specific about his refusals. He wasn't choosing slavery over freedom. He was choosing intensity over safety. The rudis meant retirement, meant stepping back, meant becoming irrelevant. Flamma wanted to burn bright until the fuel ran out. There's a modern parallel worth considering. Think about elite athletes who can't retire, fighters who take one fight too many, artists who can't stop creating even when their health fails, people whose identity becomes so fused with their performance that stopping feels like dying slowly instead of all at once. Flamma had found the one thing he was extraordinary at. In an empire of millions, he was among the absolute best at single combat. That kind of excellence is addictive. Walking away from it, even into comfortable freedom, meant becoming ordinary. The Romans eventually understood this. Writers in the generations after Flamma's death started using him as an example in philosophical discussions about virtue, purpose, and the nature of freedom. Some argued he was the freest man in Rome precisely because he chose his chains. That's probably overthinking it. More likely, Flamma simply looked at the alternative to fighting and found it empty. A freed gladiator had money but limited social mobility. He'd still be marked, still be that former gladiator, never fully accepted by respectable society. He could open a business, maybe train other fighters, but he'd always be looking backward at the arena where he mattered most. So why leave? Why trade the roar of the crowd for the quiet contempt of shopkeepers? Why exchange excellence for mere survival? The fourth refusal, the final one, suggests Flamma knew his time was running short. He was 30. His body was breaking down. The winds were getting harder. He could feel the end approaching, and he chose to meet it in the arena rather than in a bed somewhere, forgotten.